7 Erick 877-973-7425. I'm not going to talk about politics. My apologies for those of you just tuning in. I'm mentioned the other day a story, and I want to go back to it because I'm actually really fascinated by this. I'm deeply fascinated by, in the last several years, there have been a series of media stories about aliens, like mainstream media outlets about military encounters with alien technology, and the collective press is, but what about impeachment? This is Farhad Manjoo in the New York Times. The sun is not special. I know there's a curlish thing. That's a curlish thing to say about everyone's favorite celestial body. Our planet's blazing engine and eternal clock, giver of light, life, and spectacular Instagram backdrops. I mentioned this piece the other day. And I want to read a little bit more because then there are some other stories that tie into this. Awesome as it is, though, the sun is still a pretty ordinary star. One of an estimated 100 billion to 400 billion in the Milky Way galaxy alone. And the Milky Way is itself just one galaxy among hundreds of billions or perhaps trillions in the observable universe. Then there's Earth, a lovely place to raise a species, but as planets go, perhaps as unusual as a Starbucks in a strip mall. Billions of the Milky Way stars could be orbited by planets with similarly ideal conditions to support life. Across all of space, there may be quintillions of potentially habitable planets, or even a sextillion, which is more than the estimated grains of sand on all of Earth's beaches. So isn't it hubris to assume that we're the only life around? Since Nicholas Copernicus posited nearly 500 years ago that Earth is not at the center of the universe, much of what humanity has learned about the cosmos has confirmed our insignificant ordinariness. We live among Carl Sagan's pale blue dot, a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. In all the vastness of space and time, then, doesn't it seem likely, maybe even obvious, that there exist other ordinary beings or other insignificant mutts? You might respond with the physicist Enrico Fermi's famous paradox, if life is so common, why haven't we seen it? Now in a dazzling new book, Extraterrestrial, the first sign of intelligent life beyond Earth, the astrophysicist Avi Loeb offers a forceful rejoinder to Fermi. Loeb, a professor at Harvard, argues that the absence of evidence regarding life elsewhere is not evidence of its absence. What if the reason we haven't come across life beyond Earth is the same reason I can never find my keys when I'm in a hurry? Not because they don't exist, but because I did a slapdash job of looking for them. The search for extraterrestrial life has never been more than an oddity to the vast majority of scientists, Loeb writes. To them, it is a subject worthy of at best glancing interest and at worst outright derision. The attitude may be changing in the past few years. There's been a flurry of new interest in the search for aliens. Tech billionaires are funding novel efforts to scan the heavens for evidence of life. And after decades of giving the field short shrift, NASA recently joined the search. Still, Loeb argues, we are not looking hard enough. Other areas of physics, especially absurd mathematical concepts like supersymmetry, are showered with funding and academic respect, while one of the most profound questions humanity has ever pondered, are we alone, lingers largely on the sidelines. Loeb is a former chair of Harvard's Department of Astronomy and the director of its Black Hole Institute and its Institute for Theory and Computation. He spent much of his career studying the early universe and black holes, but in the past few years he's become best known for his eccentric analysis of a cosmic mystery that unfolded over 11 days in 2017. That October, a telescope in Maui captured an exotic speck speeding across the sky. It was interstellar, recognized as the first object we've ever seen that originated outside our solar system. Unusual though it was, the astronomical community quickly arrived at a consensus. The object, named Oumuamua, which translates roughly to Hawaiian for scout, was a kind of comet, asteroid, or other body of natural origin. Loeb disagrees. The simple explanation was created by an intelligent civilization not of this earth. The object's size, shape, luminosity, and in particular its unexpected trajectory around the sun suggested something like a light sail. a large, thin reflective object that might propel a vehicle using starlight in the way a sailboat is pushed by the wind. Loeb would know. Before Oumuamua was discovered, he worked on a plan to use a laser-powered light sail to send a tiny probe to Alpha Centauri, a star system about 4 light years from our sun. Reaching speeds up to 100 million miles an hour, Loeb proposed light sail would reach Alpha Centauri in about 20 years. I'm far from qualified to determine which side has the upper hand in the debate. The New Yorker's Elizabeth Colbert has a terrific piece sorting through the evidence. But in some ways, the origin of Oumuamua is not the deepest mystery in Loeb's book. A bigger puzzle is the closed-mindedness of the scientific establishment. All right, so here's a guy who works on a project for a light sail, sees this object come through and says, that's it. You should know, by the way, the overwhelming consensus of the scientific and astronomical community is that object that came through, I remember the headlines back at the time, was some sort of oblong-shaped interplanetary naturally existing object, and its shape is what caused it to look differently in radio telescopes and the like. Now, why on earth would I spend any time on this? Well, one, I just find it fascinating. We have this series of New York Times stories in the last 2 years about the military continuing to come into contact with strange objects that do not behave according to the normal laws of physics, that are increasingly seen as not of this world, including some of the scientists willing to go on the record. Now, the Sun, which is a tabloid, keep that in mind. It's not the Inquirer, but it's not the New York Times either. Stunning admission. Pentagon admits it's been testing wreckage from UFO crashes, and findings may change our lives forever, experts say. Researcher Anthony Bragalia wrote to the Defense Intelligence Agency requesting details of all UFO material which they hold and results of any tests they've been carried out on it. He wrote, this could include physical debris recovered by personnel of the Department of Defense as residue, flotsam, shot-off material, or crash materials from unidentified aerial phenomenon or unidentified flying objects. In the response, shared with The Sun, the Defense Intelligence Agency released 154 pages of test results that includes reports on a mysterious memory metal called nitinol, which remembers its original shape when folded. Bragalia said it was a stunning admission from the U.S. government, and the documents reveal that some of the retrieved debris possess extraordinary capabilities, including the potential to make things invisible or even slow down the speed of light. One question is, why did he, if this is such a monumental deal, why did he go to a tabloid? By the way, nitinol is not an alien technology. Nitinol is a metal alloy of nickel and titanium with unique properties, including superelasticity and pseudoelasticity and shape memory properties. It means nitinol can remember its original shape and return to it when heated. It has great elasticity under stress. It is used in dentistry, endodontics, in colorectal surgery, in stents, in orthopedic implants, in wires for locating breast tumors, and tubing for a wide range of medical applications. Been around for a while. It's not alien technology. But still, there is this growing fascination with all of these stories, and yet the press moves on from them as quickly as they make the breathless pronouncement. I'm still fascinated by the videos. They released some of the videos, and apparently the military has kept the high-quality ones. But the poor quality ones still show some remarkable encounters. I have personally long theorized it was actually the Air Force screwing with the Navy. And I'm still inclined to believe that. I'm also thinking, for all these people who want to believe that there are little green men out there, aliens of some kind, they sure are dismissive of angels and demons and the like. They sure are dismissive of heaven and hell, even as they pursue the search for aliens out there. But here's the thing we know about the universe. The universe is expanding. It's continuing to expand. And things in the universe are moving further and further apart from each other. So not only do we not have speed of light capable of getting from here to there or anywhere, we are moving further apart from every other object. And as a result of that, our ability to find other beings moves further and further apart by the day, even as our technology is not advancing enough. And yet there is this obsession that we should in some way search. The existence of an alien species does not preclude, then, the existence of a divine creator. C.S. Lewis kind of touched on this in the Narnia series, that each planet, each species, in some way, has a redemptive arc that echoes the arc of Scripture, whether it's Aslan in Narnia or Jesus on Earth. But why should we waste our time? Here's one of the things I found. If you go back and you look at eschatology, you know what eschatology is? Eschatology is the study of end times. The study of end times in Christian literature reflects the era in which you are. So if you look at the early 1900s, as America is advancing, Christian theologians had very positive eschatology. As Europe descends into world wars, the eschatology of theologians in Europe and then in North America actually becomes pretty bleak. It's shaped by the times they're in. Concurrent to this in secularism, when you look at discussions of the search for little green men and extraterrestrial life, when things are going fairly well here on the planet, nobody's really talking about, hey, maybe we need to go search for life elsewhere. But when people get pessimistic about where we're headed as a planet, suddenly it's, we should chart for the stars. Let's go look out there. Let's not dwell on humanity. If anything, I have concluded that the search for extraterrestrials and their technology is a better indicator for how people view life on Earth than whether or not people are actually serious about doing it. Because the more you hear people talk about, let's go off planet and find little green men, let's search the heavens for other civilizations, those tend to be the times people are pretty dour and sour about where we are right now. My personal view with this technology the military keeps finding is that it's the Air Force screwing with the Navy, and if not, it's more likely to be a demon than a little green man. I actually believe in angels and demons, the more so than I believe that there's a universe filled with planets of other intelligent civilizations. I'm not saying they're not, but I think the odds are slim that we would ever find them, given the laws of physics. You know, the law of physics in Alpha Centauri is the same as the law of physics here, and there's this thing called the speed of light, and I don't know that anyone anywhere on any planet has any technology to surpass that. And if Ilmamau is actually some sort of alien probe, well, guess what? When they get back to wherever they're going, it's going to take them a whole long time to get back here. And by the way, just one more point on this. What happens if we did find them? Who's to say that they're friendly? Why don't we just presume, life out there, they must be looking for us, we're going to look for them? I mean, who's to say they're not hiding from us because they by the time our radio waves have penetrated out there, you know what they're seeing right now in Alpha Centauri is our transmissions from World War II. So maybe they don't want to be found. And if they did, who's to say they're going to be the friendly little green men and not necessarily the aliens that, the horror movies are made of?
I really do like his opinion on things.
Erick Erickson, the information.
This hour of the program is brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. They are in Noonan, Georgia, and they are supporters, are longtime advertisers, and I hope that you will consider sending your business to First Liberty Building and Loan if you are in business. They don't help individuals, they help businesses, and they help businesses grow. They don't do small loans, they do big loans. We're talking six figures and up. And if you're connected to a business that needs a line of credit, needs capital, needs a loan, needs to grow, reach out to First Liberty Building and Loan. A lot of banks are telling businesses right now no, particularly given the discord of the stock market and the bond market. A lot of banks are getting super cautious about lending. First Liberty wants to build a relationship with you if you're a business that they think they can do business with, and they want to help you get to yes when banks are telling you no. But what you need to do is you need to go to firstlibertyga.com, firstlibertyga.com, firstlibertyga.com. Reach out to the Frost family. We've known them for years. They've been doing this since 1993. They've got a great track record of helping Georgia businesses and businesses nationwide. So if you're listening and you're not in Georgia, they can help you as well if you're in the U.S. They want to help your business grow, firstlibertyga.com. Thanks to them for sponsoring. And by the way, we're about to get some new advertisers in. I actually got told late Friday some of the ones that are coming are pretty awesome. If you want to get on board, we've got some slots left for advertising on the program. We really, I think it's March 1st is when we start filling up. So if your business wants to advertise, we are now in 16 or 17 markets across the state of Georgia. And we are very happy to have you as an advertiser, but starting March 1st, it's going to be harder. So if you want to get on, get in now, and looking forward to telling you about some of the great advertisers coming on. We are growing, folks, and that's good. You know, I'm actually working on a proposal right now about this program. Just as an aside here, I'm proud of what we've been able to pull off and want to share. You know, with a normal radio program, let's take Rush or Hannity or you name it. Stations are given the radio show. I decided when I wanted to do the show, I would do what Dave Ramsey does. He's been very successful independently as a self-syndicator. So most radio companies, they give you the show, and then you have to set aside like 5 to 7 minutes for their ads. And then you have to fill out affidavits saying that you've played those ads. And if there's breaking news and you preempt their ads, well, then you got to ditch your ads to play their ads. What we decided to do is actually we play the ads ourselves. We cut into my talk time to play the ads. And so the local radio companies have no costs. I mean, they get the show for free. They don't pay for it. And they just put it on. And they don't have to file affidavits. They don't have to make good on our ads if they can't play them because we're taking care of all of that. We make it very easy for local stations to pick it up. As a result, we've now got 16 or 17 stations nationwide. We've got a couple more coming, or not nationwide, in Georgia. We're starting to get interest out of state, and we're starting to have those conversations of how do you be a show in Georgia and step across the lines. And I think we've found a way to be able to do that so we can still talk about Georgia as people in Georgia want, but also make it more interesting to people nationwide. And a lot of that is because Georgia is becoming a swing state, and what happens in Georgia really affects the rest of the nation. So there's a way to find balance. But I'm very excited by what we've done and the fact that a lot of national advertisers are starting to pay attention to us and come on, which you'll find out about soon. I'm proud of the work we've done. Not that any of you cared about that. You care about all the other stuff, and I want to get to the other stuff as well, including Brian Kemp and gubernatorial competence. There is a story in the AJC about this, and the governor wants to be the vaccine governor. He wants to take care of health. He wants to be seen as competent for business and for the vaccine and for individual liberty, and he's trying to reset in the run-up to 2022. I want to get into that, and also a potential job killer here in Georgia unless the Biden administration does away with something. But right now, I want to flag something. For those of you up in Rome, there's a little blurb at WRGA on their website, WRGAnews.com. The Rome Alcohol Control Commission will consider an ordinance amendment allowing for the home delivery of alcoholic beverages when it meets this afternoon. The ordinance would mirror a state law passed last year that allows licensed alcohol retailers to deliver unopened alcoholic beverages in the original container to customers' homes. The customer must be 21 and show identification at the door. Another part of the ordinance would allow the city to pull the alcohol license of retailers that owe outstanding debt to the city. This is going to happen statewide, not just in Rome, as cities now consider home alcohol sales. Particularly, this has a lot to do with Instacart. The grocery store delivers. You want to buy a six-pack of beer at the grocery store and have it in your grocery delivery. They can't do that right now, but with this law, they can. And so the Rome Alcohol Control Commission is going to be talking about this afternoon in Rome. If you're at all interested, pay attention to it. We'll be back with SK Energies and the Chinese. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show. The phone number, if you'd like to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. You can, if you are so inclined, go to ewerickson.com every day. You can find out about the show, the stations we're on. I got to update that. We just picked up a slew of stations, and they're not there yet. You can find my recipes, find what I'm writing. You can find the podcast, ewerickson.com. There's a Georgia story that actually has not only economic implications for the country, but national security implications that is flying under the radar. This is from the Atlanta Business Chronicle. The future of a huge new Georgia electric vehicle battery project is uncertain after a February 10th federal ruling. South Korea-based SK Innovation is almost finished building the first of two plants in Jackson County, northeast of Atlanta, to make batteries for electric vehicles. The company planned to start pilot production of the first battery plant in the first half of this year. The second Georgia plant was expected to begin mass production in 2023. The $2.6 billion project, which was announced in November 2018 and broke ground in 2019, promised to create 2,600 jobs while cementing Georgia's place as the Southeast U.S. hub for the electric battery and vehicle market. But on February 10th, the U.S. International Trade Commission issued a ruling in a long-running trade secret and patent dispute between SK Innovation and another huge South Korea company, LG Energy, in which LG Energy alleged SK Innovation has stolen its technology. LG Energy charged that SK Innovation had engaged in trade secret theft by hiring away dozens of its engineers, manufacturing, and critical business service staff. The Commission's decision blocks the importation, domestic production, and sale of SK Innovation batteries for electric vehicles that rely on LG Energy Solutions trade secrets. The ruling provided a limited exception to allow SK Innovation to supply Ford Motor Company with electric vehicles for its EV F-150 pickup trucks for 4 years and the Volkswagen for its North America region for 2 years. Governor Brian Kemp called on Joe Biden to overturn the International Trade Commission's ruling, saying it'll hurt Georgia significantly. There's a 60-day window for presidential review, during which time the Biden administration may overturn the funding. The finding, not the funding. This is actually a bad day for all of us here in Georgia, with a major loss of jobs in the state because of this plant, over 2,000 jobs, a $1.7 billion investment in the state for lithium-ion batteries. And it's a job creation project in the green energy sector, right as Joe Biden has killed the Keystone XL pipeline to placate the environmentalists in the country. You would think he would want to salvage this, because Georgia is a state where Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff have gotten elected. Warnock is on the ballot in 2 years. There are political considerations for the Democrats here. If Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff don't have the political clout with a Democratic president to be able to get this decision reversed, they will help contribute to the loss of over 2,000 jobs in Georgia. Does Raphael Warnock really want that in 2022? You can imagine the ad campaign. Raphael Warnock could not convince Joe Biden to save 2,000 green energy jobs in Georgia. The Biden administration not only killed the Keystone XL pipeline, putting energy sector employees out of work, but killed SK Innovation's factory that would have created 2,000 green jobs in Georgia. Why doesn't Raphael Warnock have the clout? Because Raphael Warnock really is a nobody in Washington. Let's elect somebody. Let's put David Perdue back in Washington. The ad writes itself. And I just did that off the top of my head. Pick your Doug Collins, Perdue, Loeffler, you name it. If this is going to hurt Warnock. But there's something else here as well, and there is a national security tie-in. It's something that possibly the Biden administration needs to pay attention to. We all need to pay attention to this. This is from the Center for New American Security. Communication networks are the lifeblood of modern-day society. They form the conduit for the information flows fueling the world's economy. These networks also enable and transmit the media that inform and shape belief, perceptions, and ultimately what is considered truth. In the hands of liberal democracies, controlling this infrastructure means preserving free and open societies and safeguarding democratic norms and values. For authoritarians, it's a pathway to solidify their rule through oppression and marginalization, to expand influence abroad, and to subvert the rules-based order. China's push to dominate digital infrastructure leaves liberal democratic countries at a critical juncture. Now, in the rollout of 5G and beyond, there is one South Korean company that continues to partner and entangle itself with Huawei, the Chinese company that pretty much every Western power acknowledges is rolling out 5G technology in a way that China can control it and spy on everyone else. That would be LG. LG U Plus is the only one of South Korea's mobile carriers partnering with Huawei. It continues to use Huawei even as the United States and Great Britain and other world powers are pressuring all of the Western powers to stop. This would be the same LG that is going after SK Innovation. This is now, you've got LG Kim. LG Kim is a subsidiary of LG, like LG U+. There is a national security angle here. Do you want to scuttle SK Innovation's ability to build batteries in this country and give a win to a company that is continuing to do business with China in an area that Western powers are increasingly concerned about Chinese global innovation for authoritarian purposes? Or do you publicly rebuke the U.S. International Trade Commission and reject its findings, in part because you're going to be saving over 2,000 jobs, and in part because it would otherwise help a company that refuses to step away from China? The U.S., if we're really serious about dealing with this 5G problem in China, and it is a national security problem, and it is one where the Biden administration has said they agree with Donald Trump on it, to give LG a win when LG refuses to walk away from China would be absurd. To give LG a win on this would not only kill jobs in Georgia. LG's not coming here, they're going to China. It would also bolster a company and provide them whatever they need to keep going with China. If the Biden administration were to take a strong line here and say, you know what, U.S. International Trade Commission, I'm going to reject your decision. And I'm going to do it for two reasons. One, jobs, green jobs in Georgia, after I just killed the Keystone XL pipeline and put those people out of work. And then two, we need to send a signal that companies that are continuing to collaborate with China's authoritarian build out of 5G, we're not going to give them a seat at the table. You would think Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff would be all over this, and they at this point are not. John Ossoff, I don't know that he's even got a chief of staff yet. Warnock may be trying to find his footing in the Senate, but he's up for re-election in 2 years. He's got a staff already. He probably needs to be paying attention to this issue. It sounds like a minor issue in the grand scheme of things, but it's 2,000 Georgia jobs, $1.7 billion investment in the state, and also, if you reject SK Innovations, you're rewarding a company that's collaborating with the Chinese on 5G rollout, which is a national security issue for this country. The Biden administration needs to reject the U.S. International Trade Commission findings. The president has the power to do it. If the president refuses to do it, one, it's signaling that Ossoff and Warnock really don't have any clout in Washington. Two, the president is perfectly happy punishing Georgia and really isn't all that interested in creating green new jobs. And three, the president really isn't serious about taking on China. I mean, this is a perfect scenario for Biden to show he actually does want to do his Green New Deal nonsense, and he does want to be strong on China. And he could help two freshman Democrats in the Senate. It seems like a no-brainer. The fact that they're even hesitating on this actually says a whole lot more about the Biden administration, and none of it is really good. Hopefully, they will change their minds on this and stand with SK Innovation. They've already started building out the facility in Jackson County. They've already got the deal for Ford and Volkswagen. They're already there building, putting a lot of green jobs on the unemployment line after putting the Keystone XL people on the unemployment line. Doesn't sound like something the Biden administration should do, but right now that's where they're headed.
I really do like his opinion on things.
Erick Erickson.
The phone number, if you want to be a part of the program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Thank you for being with me here. I want to talk about Brian Kemp and gubernatorial competence. Greg Bluestein, writing in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution over the weekend, in the fourth floor conference room at the Morehouse School of Medicine, Governor Brian Kemp talked about what has consumed most of his time since a new year dawned: the state's ongoing fight to effectively distribute the coronavirus vaccine. Surrounded by a group of empathetic but concerned public health experts, the Republican governor watched a video about the storied medical school's efforts to contain a pandemic that's exacted a disproportionate toll on Black Georgians before offering his analysis of the state situation. I hate to say we're in a good place because we're fighting this battle every day, as you know, but our vaccination battles have continued to progress very well, Kemp told the officials. The new year has presented Kemp with dire political challenges. His approval ratings have plummeted over the past year, in large part because Donald Trump blamed him for the November election defeat. Not only must he navigate a fractious Republican Party still under Trump's sway, but he also faces a likely rematch with Stacey Abrams, whom Kemp narrowly defeated in 2018. And the centerpiece of his healthcare policy was thrown into doubt Friday when the Biden administration pulled back approval of a plan to overhaul the state's Medicaid program. The first-term governor is trying to regain his footing with an intense focus on the state's vaccination plan, holding 14 press conferences, 30 media interviews, and 8 visits to distribution sites since December 14th to detail the state's efforts to contain the pandemic. His allies hope that embracing the role of a vaccine governor could help reframe his public image and distance him from the political and coronavirus crises of 2020, when his party suffered grievous election losses and his pandemic approach came under fire from leaders of both political parties. He's doing a good job of getting the number of vaccines in people's arms. Yes, there was a rough start, but we're getting around 160,000 vaccines a week, and they're getting distributed, said Ben Watson, state senator from Savannah, and a physician. He's been criticized for a lack of supply, and he's got no control over it. It's a supply issue, not an issue about actually administering it, says Watson. The state's approach, with health officials long warned would be messy and unpredictable, has been plagued by missteps at the state and federal level. Computer systems crashed, phone lines were overloaded, shipments of doses were delayed, expected reserves didn't exist. Dr. Harry Hyman, a professor of public health at Georgia State University, says the rocky rollout of the state's vaccine were only part of the problem. And on it goes. He's denied a request from education officials to inoculate teachers ahead of schedule, saying that adding teachers to the list would make the state's severe lack of supply harder for the elderly and those who are high at risk. Everyone keeps telling me we can do more if we have more, said Kemp, but there isn't more. I'm actually intrigued by this, in part because I actually like Brian Kemp, and all of you who are spittle-fueled rage about him right now liked him too, until your guy lost, and he had nothing to do with it. And those who believe he could have done something differently, frankly, are ignorant. And I don't mean to insult you, but if you think there was anything that Brian Kemp could have done differently, you're ignorant, because the state constitution prohibits the governor's involvement in the election. There's nothing the governor could have done. And if you really believe that the United States Supreme Court would have allowed the governor and the Georgia legislature to change the rules for the runoff and have it go into effect, you're also ignorant, because not only is there existing Supreme Court precedent on that issue, but do you really believe John Roberts and Brett Kavanaugh would have sided with Georgia on this? No, they would not have. We already have that precedent too. We've already seen the Supreme Court in other states refuse to go along with changing the rules. Kemp is getting blamed for things that weren't his problem and not his fault. He is now hated by the president, and because he's hated by the president, he's hated by the president's supporters, even though the president either doesn't know or doesn't care that what he's saying isn't actually true. The president's supporters likewise either don't know or don't care. Whatever the president says is gospel, even if it's not true. And that's unfortunate for a guy like Kemp, who is in trouble with these people when he couldn't have done anything different in the election. He constitutionally has no role to play. He could not call a special session of the legislature and then had any of the rules changes go into effect in January. The Supreme Court has said so on multiple occasions, no less. What he can do is get jobs and get the economy going. And part of that depends on competent rollout of the vaccine. Part of that is incompetence at the federal level, not a Trump thing per se, but just the federal bureaucracy having a hard time rolling out the vaccine. This is back from the AJC. Amber Schmidtke, a public health microbiologist who publishes a newsletter on Georgia's battle with COVID-19, says she's distressed that some rural counties that helped put Kemp in office have the highest death rates in the state. When the vaccine effort is as important as it is, perhaps determining his own reelection prospects, then why did the governor kick the responsibility for its rollout down to public health districts and local health departments? Why isn't every resource at his disposal devoted to the effort? The governor has acknowledged the uneven rollout as he's maintained that Georgia is doing the best it can with limited supply. He and other administration officials hope that the one-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine, now pending federal approval, will help the logistical challenge. He's also vented about the slow pace of vaccinations, a lagging rate that put Georgia at the bottom tier of states, as throngs of people eligible to get the vaccine have waited to be inoculated. There is so much not in his control for which he is blamed for, and so much that's within his control that he's doing well, but he's also philosophically guided by the idea that he, as governor, should not be doing all of these things. And this is part of the problem when your principles hit the road. The governor, remember, if you recall early on in his administration, when this virus started spreading, took the position that the regions of the state should be able to deal with the virus as they see fit. And if your region needs to go on lockdown, lock it down. And if someone else's region doesn't, don't. The virus is affecting different parts of the state in different ways. And ultimately that became politically untenable, and he decided to do a one-shop-fits-all major effort to shut down the state. And why did he shut down the state? He shut down the state not for lockdown for the sake of lockdown, but so it would give hospitals time to build up resources and reserves. So hospitals built up resources and reserves. He reopened the state, and the virus held steady until the Memorial Day holiday and the post-George Floyd riots and started going up. And then after Thanksgiving, it skyrocketed as people kind of let their guard down and weren't socially distancing for the holidays. It's not Brian Kemp's fault. It's people's fault. And the left is like, well, had you locked everyone in their houses, Governor, this wouldn't have happened. But he was never going to do that. And what we're seeing is the hospitals were never overwhelmed. The governor's plan, this gets lost in so many of the details. The governor's plan actually worked. He led the hospitals for a month of lockdown, built up hospital staff, resources, reserves, everything they needed. And when the big spike came, remember early on it was flatten the curve. It was flatten the curve. 15 days to flatten the curve, a month to flatten the curve, 6 months to flatten the curve. We always knew the virus was going to go up. The number of cases were going to go up. The whole key to shut down for a month was so that hospitals would not be so overwhelmed that we were having to ration ventilators. In the time that it occurred, we now know that there's other data out there that shows that hospitals never did get overwhelmed, and also that we've made medical advances that have changed treatment options. The governor did a good job. Unfortunately, he's not going to get a lot of credit from the Democrats, but also there are some Republicans who are more Trump voters than they are Republican.
15.
They're not going to give him any credit either because they're so mad at him about an election
10.
over which he had no control. It's an unfortunate position for him to be in. Hello there, it is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you want to be a part of the program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Well. The Biden administration is going after guns. Yup, they're going after guns. They pivoted. Remember, you used to talk about pivots all the time. Politicians pivoting. While they're still trying to deal with COVID, they've released an executive memorandum from the White House. They want Congress to enact gun control. They're not skipping a beat here. This is mostly for show, but we should take it seriously. Hang on a second. Let me get this pulled up here. Biden gun call. Yes. Here we go. President Joe Biden on Sunday called on Congress to strengthen gun laws on the third anniversary of the mass shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Today we mourn with the Parkland community. We mourn for all who had lost loved ones to gun violence, Biden said in a statement. The president called for several provisions, including background checks on all gun sales, banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, and eliminating legal immunity for gun manufacturers. The administration will not wait for the next mass shooting to heed that call. We will take action to end our epidemic of gun violence and make our schools and communities safer, Biden said. We owe it to all those we've lost and all those left behind to grieve to make a change. 14 students and 3 staff members were killed in the Parkland shooting. The student survivors started the March for Our Lives movement in support of gun control legislation. Not all of the student survivors. So, let's talk about the politics of message for a moment, shall we? The Biden administration calls on Congress to do something. Specifically, they call on Congress to enact gun control legislation. Background checks on all gun sales, which pretty much already happens. Banning assault weapons, which means any spooky gun. And high-capacity magazines. Aren't you glad they didn't say clips? And eliminating legal immunity for gun manufacturers. Pat Toomey, the outgoing Republican senator of Pennsylvania, and Joe Manchin, the Democratic senator from West Virginia, both support expanded background checks, the gun show loophole closure, they call it, that could get a bipartisan support in the Senate. Banning assault weapons, you may get a Susan Collins or a Lisa Murkowski to support it, but probably not. You could still do it with Kamala Harris casting the tie-breaking vote. High-capacity magazines, you may not be able to get that one with Joe Manchin. Eliminating legal immunity for gun manufacturers, Joe Manchin is opposed. So are all the Republicans. So you can't get all of that in the existing Senate. And then there's the filibuster. You can't add these things to reconciliation. Reconciliation is the budget process by which you can do a budgetary legislation in the Senate that bypasses the filibuster. You can do it once a year. It only is for fiscal policy that benefits the nation's fiscal picture and does not change public policy. That's the key here. Does not change public policy. Eliminating legal immunity for gun manufacturers, banning high-capacity magazines, banning assault weapons, doing expanded background checks on gun sales. None of those things are fiscal in nature, and they change public policy. So they can't get added to reconciliation unless you just ignore the parliamentarian, and essentially what you're doing then is you're blowing up the filibuster altogether. That's not going to happen. So essentially, this is performance. This is the politics of message. This is Joe Biden. He doesn't even hold a press conference. He doesn't talk about this in public. he releases a statement in writing saying, this is the anniversary of a school shooting and I want Congress to do something. He's not putting any force behind it. He's not putting any clout behind it. He's not putting any administration maneuvering behind it. He is virtue signaling, if you will, to the gun control crowd that he's with them. Nancy Pelosi also issued a statement saying Congress would work with the Biden administration to enact 2 background check bills. The House passed the Bipartisan Background Checks Act and the Enhanced Background Checks Act during the last Congress, when the Democrats had a larger majority. Susan Rice, the head of the White House Domestic Policy Council, and Cedric Richmond, a senior advisor to Biden, hosted a virtual meeting last week with leaders of gun violence prevention advocacy groups to discuss how to reduce gun violence. They want Congress to act. The Democrats are barely hanging on to the House of Representatives. There are some moderate Democrats who would lose if they voted for this stuff, and they know it. They don't care. The Democrats are always more willing to sacrifice their majority to advance their legislative goals than the Republicans are. But in the Senate, there's the filibuster. So what they have to do, and what they're going to do, is they're going to raise commotion about the filibuster. You know, Barack Obama called it racist, said it was a vestige of racism. Everything is racist if the Democrats don't like it. And now, of course, you've got the intellectual elite of the Democratic Party out there saying we got to blow up the Senate, metaphorically speaking, of course, that we've got to revise exactly what it is as our Democratic and Republican institutions. So David from the Canadian is writing at The Atlantic, if there was one idea shared by just about every author of the Constitution, it was the one articulated by James Madison at the convention of June 26, 1787. The mass of people would be susceptible to fickleness and passion, he warned. They would suffer from want of information as to their true interest. Those who must labor under all the hardships of life would secretly sigh for a more equal distribution of its blessing. Over time, as the population expanded and crowded into cities, the risk would only worsen that the major interest might, under certain impulses, be tempted to commit injustice on the minority. To protect property from the people, and ultimately the people from themselves, the framers would have to erect a necessary fence against impetuous councils. A Senate to counterbalance the House of Representatives, selected from a more elite few and serving for longer terms, would be one such fence. The indirect election of the president through an electoral college would be another. A federal judiciary confirmed by the Senate and serving for life would provide one more, and so on through the constitutional design. The system of governments in the United States has evolved in many important ways since 1787, but the mistrust of unpropertied majorities, especially urban unpropertied majorities, persists. In no other comparably developed society is voting as difficult. In no peer society are votes weighted as unequally. In no peer society is there a legislative chamber where 41% of the lawmakers can routinely outvote 59%, as happens in the U.S. Senate. This system is justified today with the same argument as when it was established a quarter millennium ago. We're not a democracy, tweeted Mike Lee of Utah in October. Lee explained his meaning in a second tweet that crammed Madisonian theory into fewer than 280 characters. Democracy isn't the objective. Liberty, peace, and prosperity are. We want the human condition to flourish. Rank democracy can thwart that. American anti-majoritarians have always promised that minority privilege will deliver positive results. Stability, sobriety, the security of the public debt, and tranquil and peaceful presidential elections. But again and again, those promises have proved the exact opposite of reality. In practice, the privileged minority has shown itself to be unstable and unsober. High, very high on the list of Madison's concerns about pure democracy was the risk of the unpropertied majority might vote to repudiate debts. In Madison's single most famous piece of writing, Federalist Number 10, he justified the complex mechanism of the Constitution as a safeguard against debt repudiation and other such improper or wicked projects. In July of 2011, Madison's fears almost came true. The United States was pushed to the verge of a debt default. but the would-be repudiators were not representatives of the poor or the urban dwellers. They were representatives of the party of the wealthy and the rural dwellers. Republicans in the House and the Senate pushed the country toward the gravest fiscal crisis in history. They refused to raise the debt ceiling until 48 hours after the Treasury Department exhausted its legal right to borrow, risking a default that would have capsized credit markets. This is somewhat revisionist by David Frum, because what the Republicans actually did by refusing to raise the debt ceiling would have forced the Treasury Department to prioritize debt payment over everything else. They still could have paid the debt service. They just couldn't have done anything else. And it was a negotiating tactic that worked to bring about sequestration. That was the first time the government had in a very long time actually cut the budget. He leaves all of that out. But what's so interesting here is he's willfully dismissing the fact that if you allowed the majority to have its way in this country, they would be wiping out student loan debt, their obligations. They would be wiping that out. They would be imposing confiscatory taxation on those who have succeeded in the United States to give to those who had not. What's so interesting here is that he makes this case at the beginning that to protect property from the people, and ultimately the people from themselves, the founders erected a necessary fence against impetuous councils. The system of government has changed over time, but the mistrust of unproperty majorities, especially urban unproperty majorities, persists. Hello, did we not see people burning down America this summer? Did we not see people burning down America this summer and the press and the Democrats sympathetic to them? Did we not see the riots in the summer? Have we not seen the people in the Democratic coalition demanding a repudiation of legally entered contracts for student loan debts? We not seen all this stuff. This is an absurd fantasy by David Frum. That's not to excuse people in the minority, but it certainly is. Man, you've got to be completely out to lunch and not paying attention to what's going on with a great many people in urban settings in this country to read David Frum and think he's capturing reality. And you should actually understand that the genius of the founders is proven through this piece. It's ridiculous. Essentially, what David Frum is upset about is all of the progressive advancements he wants cannot become policy so long as a minority in this country is powerful enough still to say no. And that's kind of what the founders understood that David Frum does not. Of course, he's Canadian. It's that in this country, if there is, given its systems, given that the states are semi-sovereign entities, that a large minority means that you should move slowly. You should not, once you become in the majority, take all. You should move slowly. When a minority is reduced to nothing, then you have the ability and license to advance quickly. So if the Democrats could get to 60 in the Senate, they could advance whatever they wanted to do, and the Republicans couldn't stop, but they can't do that. Essentially, what David Frum is lashing out at is a frustrating inability for Democrats to be able to persuade enough people that they're right. And we're going to hear more of this from the Democrats, that they haven't persuaded enough people that they're right. And so now they want to break down the institutions and the rules that block them from doing whatever they want. This is about rule breaking by a Canadian, that the Americans should now do what the Canadians do, where if you have the majority, you can do whatever you want. And then, hey, if they get the majority back, they can undo everything done. The United States is a flawed system, but it's less flawed than all the other systems. If you don't like it, go back to Canada.
Honest news and conservative views.
Never separated from the truth.
buddy of mine text that he wouldn't comply with the gun law. Neither would I. I lost my guns in a boating accident next week. In Texas right now, this actually is really funny to me. In Texas right now, they are in a massive, the entire state, from the northern panhandle down to the Mexican border, is in a winter storm. Austin, Texas is snowed in. They're having rolling blackouts in Texas. Do you know why, in part, they're having rolling blackouts in Texas? Well, nearly half of Texas's installed wind power turbine capacity is offline because the frozen wind turbines, yeah, that's right, in West Texas, it's so cold, the wind turbines have frozen. The spot price for electricity in Texas is currently $9,000 per megawatt hour. In the summer, it was $100 per megawatt hour. That was high, $100. Now it's $9,000. All the wind power in Texas, they put all those windmills in, wind turbines, I'm sorry. It has suppressed investment in nuclear plants and fossil fuel burning plants. Well, when there's no wind and demand is high, there's just no power, and the wind turbines can't spin because they're frozen solid. And they're having to use fossil fuel burning helicopters to de-ice the windmills to try to get them to work. And some very helpfully are saying, hey, we should ask the Europeans about this. Well, in Norway, they're having to import electricity from Poland, which generates its power through coal burning because the Norwegian windmills are frozen. The UK right now has their highest electricity prices everywhere. In Sweden, they have turned on their fuel oil power plants because the windmills are frozen. Now, you can add heaters to these, but if you add heaters to them, it affects the economics of them and the efficiencies of them. And in the Chicago area right now, where they have the heaters, they're at 5% efficiency. There's a problem here. You got to find some balance. I'm not opposed to any power company that wants to put in solar power or windmills, but we need to understand that the last time the world relied on the sun and the wind for its power needs, it was called the Dark Ages for a reason. The windmills and the solar panels don't work all the time. You know what does work all the time? Nuclear power. Coal burning power works. You can't have an exclusively green energy solution because there are parts of this country where you can't build a dam to generate hydroelectric. There are parts of the country where the sun doesn't shine all the time. There are parts of the country where the wind doesn't blow all of the time. But in any one of those parts of the country, you could build a coal burning power plant or a nuclear power plant. And frankly, this country should get serious about nuclear power plants again. There are new technologies for nuclear power plants, and they're far safer and far more reliable than the old ones. We should be building them. It is remarkable to me that in France, for example, majority of power in France comes from nuclear power, last I checked. And in this country, we should be building them. We've had these nightmare scenarios, and ironically, there are a lot of environmentalists out there who have been opposed to the whole idea of nuclear power. But and by the way, nuclear power now, you don't have as much waste, generate as much nuclear waste. Gotta do something. Gotta move somewhere in some direction. You know, near me here in Middle Georgia, there are two massive solar farms. Georgia Power is building one south of me, a pretty expansive. It's going to be the largest solar farm in the Southeast. It's on the way to Eastman. Go down I-16. You get off the interstate down there, and you take, what is that highway? Runs along I-16. In any event, you take that, and you wind up hitting this massive solar plant. It's highway, is it 129? Yeah, 129. You get off at 129. You follow that down towards Eastman, and there's this massive solar farm that they're building down there. And we gotta do something beyond solar, though. Georgia Power is also building nuclear power here in Georgia. So Georgia hopefully won't run into the problems Texas are running into. Texas has its own energy grid. Texas is not on a national energy grid. It's got its own state energy grid. But the environmentalists pressured the energy companies to ditch coal and nuclear for wind, and now the windmills are frozen shut. They're paying $9,000 an hour for energy, which is absurd. and welcome back. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you want to call in and be a part of the program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. There are so many people buzzing about this piece this morning nationwide. I wanted to read some of it for you here and talk about it. This has gone viral, as they say, on the internet. Maybe we need a new word given the pandemic. Rebecca Bodenheimer, PhD. The title, A Progressive Parent's Rant about the politics surrounding school reopening. I think we're at a crucial point in this debate on school reopening right now. Case rates are dropping quickly, the surge is over, and people are starting to get vaccinated, way too slowly, of course. The public health community, including the CDC, has reached consensus that reopening schools is an urgent priority. Instead of citing all my sources, I'm going to do more of a free write here, so feel free to reach out if you want me to cite a source for anything I write here. Okay, whatever. This is because the harms of prolonged school closure vastly outnumber the risk of COVID. It's not only learning loss among public school kids, mostly in urban areas, though that will, of course, have long-term implications, especially for teenagers who really need to get decent grades to be able to get into college, but who are flunking classes at astronomical rates. Remember also that they'll have to compete against private school kids who are having a much more normal school year. More importantly, it's our kids' mental health that's the real emergency. A few weeks ago, the New York Times published a devastating piece about the rise of student suicides in Las Vegas and how that got the superintendent to open schools. All over the country, mental health emergencies and hospital visits by kids are skyrocketing. The prolonged isolation, depression, and anxiety that stem from learning by yourself on a computer all day are taking a massive toll on kids who haven't seen the inside of school in almost a year. I just don't know how anyone can sit by and think this is an acceptable state of affairs for a developed country. It just makes my blood boil to see how little this country cares about our kids. All of Europe has done the right thing. Schools are last to close, first to open. It's simply not a political stance in Europe as it is here to say we need to reopen schools for the sake of kids' well-being and emotional and academic development. The politicization of this issue is what's really, well, she uses the F word, screwed up. Schools are largely open in red states and closed in blue ones. It's very difficult for me to understand the simplistic thinking that says Trump says open schools, so we must keep them closed at all costs. I have never felt so alienated from the people I usually align myself with politically. I will never understand how the left in this country has decided that advocating for putting kids first is somehow right-wing. I'm hearing from progressive parents all the time who are so infuriated about the Democratic apathy around school reopening, from politicians like Gavin Newsom, who are willing to allow their stances to be dictated by teachers' unions, that they'll consider supporting the recall effort, maybe even switching parties. Because here's the thing. Parents are not willing to sacrifice their kids' well-being for the sake of ideology or being a good leftist, and they shouldn't. It's our most important job to do what's best for our kids. And if that means calling out teachers' unions, so be it. I won't stay silent while unions ignore the science and the entire public health community and all the research telling us schools aren't drivers of transmission, that spread is much lower in schools than in the surrounding community. Last March, we didn't know any better. But now we know. And we've known for months. Europe opened up in the fall. Texas, Florida, all the red states opened up. Rhode Island was one of the few blue states that was committed to putting kids first. Can you remember even one major outbreak that was tied to school transmission? I can't. And teachers aren't at greater risk either. Many of the parents I'm working with on this issue see themselves as progressive and have until now supported organized labor and unions. I myself went to the picket line for Oakland teachers 2 years ago. But it's so clear to us that teachers' unions are dead wrong on this issue and that their interests are diametrically opposed to what's best for our kids. Your own child might be doing okay in remote learning, but by and large, kids aren't doing well. Mine sure isn't. Just remember, the principles of child development haven't just vanished because we're in a pandemic. It's still not good to have our kids in front of the screen for hours upon hours every day. Kids still need to learn alongside other kids and still need to play with other kids. What I'm saying is there's no amount of improvement of distance learning you can do that will make it be a good platform for learning. Now, here's where I'm going to go in hard on the unions. Not the teachers, but the unions. I know there are many teachers who don't feel the union represents them on this, And at that point, here are some amazing examples of brave teachers who've spoken out. There's an op-ed by a New York Times teacher. There's by New York City teacher. There's a YouTube video. There's another Baltimore teacher, San Francisco teachers who are speaking up. On and on it goes. And then, of course, you've got Dr. Fauci now, who's towing the party line for the Biden administration.
They are guidelines, but they're not requirements. How confident are you that the guidelines will be followed? And do school districts have the resources they need to reopen safely?
Well, George, the second part of your question is really a good one. I think that the schools really do need more resources, and that's the reason why the National Relief Act that we're talking about getting passed, we need that. The schools need more resources. The things we didn't have before, there wasn't anything that was put down solidly on paper on saying these are the kind of things that you should consider, these are the kind of things that you should follow. I mean, there was talk about it, but it wasn't actually put down in a single document that you could access, the teachers, the educators, and everyone else can. I think it can be done. I mean, obviously, it's not a perfect situation, but it's really important to get the children back to school in as safe as way as possible. Safe for the children, but also safe for the teachers and the other educators.
This is the Dr. Fauci who a few weeks ago was saying we could open the schools. The head of the CDC 2 weeks ago said we could go on and open the schools, and only after being admonished by the Biden administration came out and said, oh, no, actually, maybe we need to wait. I thought it was only the Trump administration that politicized this. At this point, it's very clear the Biden administration itself is politicizing the issue of opening schools. It is the Biden administration itself that is doing exactly what they accused the Trump administration of doing. I mean, you had Jen Psaki the other day, remember, saying we needed to open 50% of schools at least once a week. Even Jake Tapper from CNN has been calling these people out, saying, wait a second, we've got to go on and open the schools. The science says we can open the schools. The data says, remember, up in Paulding County, remember the video? It went viral in Paulding County of the school, the high school, where they were super crowded and everybody was outraged. Everybody was livid. Everybody was demanding, shut back down those schools. How dare you, Georgia, reopen those schools? And now we actually know that there was no viral spread from that event. No significant viral spread, I should say. In fact, the data shows that teachers are bringing it from out of school to school. They're not spreading it in school. And yet they don't want to open the schools. This is the craziest thing here, is that you're like this woman, this progressive woman notes that in Europe they've opened the schools. In red states, they've opened the schools. We're not seeing huge viral spread in red states. My kid's public school or private school has been open since August. They had to go to remote learning once or twice for a week at a time. Nothing prolonged. Do you know, I'm looking now in Georgia, where I am, the 7-day moving average, we're at 2,574 cases. You know, if you want to get back to that anytime close, you got to go to December 3rd, really December 2nd. If you take the date of onset, which is the 14-day window and all of that, the 7-day moving average is 3,226. And again, you got to go back to December 2nd to get anything comparable on that. We're in February 15th, and if you want to find an average of that, you got to go back to February 1st or 2nd, or I'm sorry, December 1st or 2nd, December of last year, which also puts us, just for perspective, right around the end of July as things were trending down again. We don't really even have an explanation for why the virus trends are going to. Did y'all know this? It's getting overshadowed by all the talk of vaccinations, but we don't actually have any idea why the virus is burning out. We don't know. It's not the vaccine. We have not vaccinated enough people to correspond to the rapid drop-off in cases, and it is a pretty rapid drop-off in cases. Down 39% nationwide from 2 weeks ago. Hospitalizations are down 28%. Deaths are down 18%. Now, let's look at states, because this is pretty remarkable. Here are the states where coronavirus cases are high and staying high: Alaska, Colorado, and South Dakota. And South Dakota is 110 cases. The states where cases are going down is pretty much all of them. The states where cases are low and staying low: Missouri, Maine, Minnesota, Washington, Wyoming, Michigan, Oregon, North Dakota, Hawaii, and then you've also got the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Northern Marianas Islands. Now, where are the states where there are few COVID cases, but they're going up? There are none. There are no states like that. None. And yet in blue states, they don't want the schools to open. It's remarkable to me. I mean, I see, Josh Krashauer from National Journal quoting this piece: "I just don't see how anyone can sit and think this is an acceptable state of affairs for a developed country. It just makes my blood boil to see how little the country cares for the kids." This is from the piece that I read you. Here's a tracker: the percent of schools opened by states. Utah, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Florida, and South Carolina have 80 to 100% of their schools open. Georgia and Alabama have 60 to 80% of their schools open. The states that are shut down are Maryland, New Jersey, the whole New England area, New York and up, and then New Mexico, California, Oregon, Washington, all progressive states. It's the Democratic states, it's the progressive states that are continuing to keep schools shut down. A point needs to be made that is not getting made in all of this. Part of the reason that these Democrat states are doing things like this and can get away with things like this is not just teachers' unions. It's that the Democratic Party is evolving into a secular, childless party. Yes, there are progressives who have children, but overwhelmingly progressives are far more likely to put off having kids and then to have fewer kids than conservatives. As the Democratic Party evolves, the public policy choices of that party are beginning to evolve into a party that caters to the childless. So abortion on demand grows. The needs of kids in education decreases. We are rapidly heading to a point in this country where conservatives will have a social safety net of family around them to take care of them, and progressives will have to have the state reshape its priorities. In fact, what you can see coming in this country long term is an increasing situation where progressive public policy will be devoid of contemplation of children, and to the extent it contemplates children, will view them as bad, as a tax on the resources from them. They're going to eventually need their senior centers to be taken care of because they have no children to take care of them, and they will make those who have kids pay for it as best they can. I mean, we are in a growing upending of society where the secular elite in this country are increasingly childless. And so their public policy positions rapidly move them towards public policies that favor those who don't have kids. I mean, look at the tax structure in this country. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day who is gay, who is not married in part for taxation reasons. And then I've got another friend who is gay and married, and they're trying to adopt kids to get a taxable benefit, and they're learning that the taxable benefit isn't as great as when they were kids with the taxable benefit their parents had. You know, Mitt Romney is of all people, Mitt Romney is pushing a plan for a child credit for families to incentivize child raising and child rearing. And it largely does so by consolidating a bunch of other government entities without actually expanding a new welfare state. It if anything else, reins in the welfare state and prioritizes helping families with kids. It's actually kind of an intriguing plan from a conservative perspective, but I realize it's Mitt Romney, so a lot of Trump supporters will hate it, but it's actually worth considering. And even some of the intellectual standard bearers of what is or is not Trumpism these days are looking at his plan and saying, he's onto something. They may not like that it's him coming up with the idea, but they kind of like the plan. The left is held hostage by their unions. You can say the right is held hostage by the gun industry, whatever you want, but the left is held hostage by their unions, and right now by the teachers' unions, and progressives are thinking of throwing out Gavin Newsom in California and possibly voting for a Republican just to get schools open. But the longer this goes on in society, and the longer the left increasingly prioritizes singleness, or at least not having kids, the greater the larger the interests of this country are going to diverge between the childless and those who have kids. And of course, those who have kids are going to be declining in numbers, but you compound them with their kids, and their vote will matter. I've said all along, I'm a big believer in federalism. And I think if California wants to have abortion and gay marriage and the like, and your conservative state wants to have traditional marriage and no abortion, let them. Let each state have its way. Don't impose will on each other. It's what I was talking about on Friday with cancel culture. You should be able to live in an area that has a majoritarian interest. And your majoritarian interest should govern in your local community culturally. But the left won't let you. It's kind of ironic. I mentioned this David Frum piece earlier where they want majoritarianism in Congress. They want the majority to dominate with no respect to the minority, but they don't want to offer that culturally to conservatives locally who happen to be the majority in their local community. Nope, can't have that. Federalism is the answer to what ails us, but the left in particular is deeply hostile to it because it may actually mean that conservatives can expose that their ideas are better. If you let California have abortion and gay marriage and Georgia have traditional marriage and no abortion, guess what? Eventually, Georgians outnumber Californians. And California can't have that, can they?
You can follow Erick around social media at
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. I want to, well, I want to call you again if you haven't read my piece on cancel culture. Some of you sent me very nice feedback on it, and I hope you'll read it. I hope you will text the word data to 33777. Text the word data to 33777 because I wrote this piece on what's happening now, where I think cancel culture is going to lead to political violence because of the disproportionality of it. When the left is so dominant culturally that it can silence anyone on the right it disagrees with, I think you're in a very bad place culturally. You're in a very bad place, and we're going to see more and more of this as the left tries to censor and silence others. And one of the big issues that we're going to have to grapple with is what to do with tech companies. I have always been sympathetic to the idea that if you don't like it, you don't have to use it, and you can go elsewhere. But what we saw in the aftermath of Twitter banning President Trump, and then all the big tech companies shutting down Parler and the like, which I've got a Parler account, but I got no use for it. I don't want one more social media place I've got to go. That is increasingly just an echo chamber. But something's got to give with these tech companies. They're playing with fire, and I am less and less sympathetic to them. I try to distinguish. Like, I think Facebook treats conservatives better than Twitter, but it has its own problems. I think that Google, if it believes it can shape the algorithm to show you information based on intersectional issues, then it can shape the algorithm to not show you conservative voices and views. And we should be wary of the algorithm. And I don't know yet that we have hit on a good solution for what to do. There's this thing you're going to hear a lot about this year. I've talked about it some here, called Section 230. Section 230 is the view that Section 230 is not the view. It is the Communications Decency Act. It's a provision that prohibits internet publishers from being sued for when people not under their control put stuff on their site. So if you've got a comment section on a site and someone on that comment section slanders someone else, you cannot be sued for their slander because you don't control that person, even as you allow comments. And even if you moderate, you can't be sued. If you get rid of that, you're going to get rid of not just comment sections, you're probably going to get rid of Facebook and Twitter and the like. And honestly, more and more, I'm of the opinion that it's not necessarily bad if some of these things do go away, particularly Twitter. I think it, at this point, serves a net social ill, not a net social good. And we're going to have to rethink these things. I was going to talk more about that today. Orrin Hatch, of all people, has a piece, but out of time. I will talk to you guys tomorrow.